Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
I was asking about sleeping, and I was coming back to essential oils. We were touching on the value of tea tree and using it for like cold sores and other bacterial and fungal and viral things, and how mild it is. But for sleep, lavender is, and for grief, lavender is a wonderful essential oil. What I do with people who are I have newly lost someone, is I give them a bottle of lavender so they can put a couple of drops on a Kleenex and put it on their pillow at night so they can go to sleep. And so they can, smell it in the middle of the night when they wake up, because that's what we do when we grieve. We don't necessarily stay sleeping. So anyway, I just thought I would pass that on too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. So we were talking last week. We started to talk about the different heavens.
Yes.
In the manual, in the Reiki manual.
Yes. And that was at the master level, that information. And I gave a class this last Friday. When I give a teaching, a training, whether it's a Reiki 1 and 2 or a master level, I will do it also with Karuna. I offer 3 free classes. They've already paid for it with their training, in my opinion. There are some things I just don't touch on during the training because there's not time. There are so many options. And this area of the 12 heavens or consciousness or dimensions or planes, whatever we want to put for titles, is one of those areas. And so I had done a training in the spring for 2. I had already done this training or this class with the other 3. So all 5 of them came, the masters, to learn about this and this consciousness. And we talked, I think, about the first heaven this last time, or the first consciousness, and the second being the same as the first being this Earth's plane with the good, the bad, the ugly in it. And that is true of the second as well, the good, the bad, and the ugly. People, thoughts, ideas, constructs, angels, entities, all manner of creatures can be in that second dimension. Some have their highest good in mind, and then others do not. They're a very low vibration functioning personality. And when we have that, we can get all sorts of trouble here in our world that we're in right now, especially when we are working to increase or improve the direction we live, or maybe heal something that has been harmed in us, maybe from very young. And when we have that interference, then we need to know that that's probably coming from another source. We're not talking about exorcisms, demons, possessions, obsessions. We're not talking about that kind of thing. That's left to those who wear a stole, who are ordained and have the authority to deal with that side that's very negative and very harmful. See a whole lot of it going on in our world today. All you have to do is look at war. But the thing is, we do get bothered and troubled by other vibrations that don't have our best interest at heart and are trying to triumph over us. There are just those who carry the jealousy, the anger, the bitterness, the frustration, after they leave this earth. And then they kind of want to come back and hang around again, trying to figure out what they want to do or be. And sometimes it isn't the highest intention for themselves. So when we do figure that out and get it understood that we're being bothered by something because we can't get rid of whatever is troubling us, then we need to look at that. Now, within that second consciousness is also those higher entities. It can be angels. It can be other people that have lived here. In the Catholic tradition, we would call them saints. But there's all manner of other wonderful beings that are at a higher level that will come to that level that isn't of the earth. It's that second dimension, but they will come there to help not only those on earth, but also, and we call them spirit guides. And they will also be available for those who are in that second dimension that are working toward moving out of it to move on for their own spiritual development. Mm-hmm. So we get all manner of things in that second level. And then when you get to the third heaven, it's possible there to heal the ego. Now, William Rand does a beautiful job in talking about that. And I found that information very, very helpful when I was doing the teaching. There were five, I found, beginning with page 43 in that red manual, 43 has the first of the traumas that he said can be healed. And all of these contribute to the ego issues that are negative or not for the best interest of others. Our ego will always serve us. Right. It has to. That's my purpose. Yeah. This is who I say I am in the world. But sometimes that's to be a bully and to triumph over other people and, outdo their ego. So when we're talking about healings that need to take place, the first one that he addresses is healing of the religious trauma. And there are people who have been badly, badly damaged by religions. And it doesn't mean any particular one. It can happen anywhere. And it can happen because someone of a lower vibration didn't have someone else's intention for their highest good. And then the second one is on page 49, and it is talking, he addresses the authentic self. And that is the part of us that is connected to the divine. Mm-hmm. That's me, but it's that me that is going to have influence from the other side for my spirit. And then the culturally created self also begins on page 49 and runs over to page 50. And that culturally created self is really where we lose the authentic self in our life when we're very, very young, because there are certain things that we do as a child that need correction. And then there are certain things that only the culture will allow, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent. This is the way we do it in our family. This is the way we do it in our town. This is the way we do it in our country. We have all of those messages. And so by the time a child gets not very old, they pretty well push down anything that was their authentic self, because to express that might be in opposition to what the cultural pieces should be, according to our families.
So in scientific terms, they talk about that as the first 7 years, which I've heard several ideas around this age. A long time ago it was, the kids started working about that time, because by then they had kind of beat out of them this authentic self. We're talking about this spiritual part. Yes. Of course, their brains are developing, so they're better able to be present in the world. But I can't remember who or where, what I heard, but I heard somebody who was involved. I think it was education. Either that was education or it was religion, where there was a suggestion that you need to get them by 7, because if you don't get them by 7, then you can't brainwash them. Basically, is what it is. I mean, it's to a degree, it's like brainwashing, but it's really just us learning to develop our egos for this place. There's a reason why we have our methods, right? Like we're protecting ourselves and we're surviving and playing our role and so forth. But I found it really interesting that it was somebody who was higher up. It was either education or it was a religion. And they were like, you have to get them by 7. If you get them by 7 and they're on par, then they're going to be on par with us on this facade, right? For the rest of their life. Yes. But if you don't do it before 7, then you don't get them.
Yes. And so we stay in what Richard Rohr would refer to as first half of life thinking, Yeah. And then that was the third one. The fourth area of healing that is needed is it's in the dormant, unhealed parts. That would be in the authentic self. Those things that have been dormant because of many things, including the culture. It doesn't have to be just the culture. There can be other extenuating things that happen. But then the fifth one is the healing of the ego, and he has that on page 52. What I found interesting with this manual, this text, is that he addresses these 5 areas, which is very, very much the psychology of this spirituality, that he says that the Reiki, Holy Fire 3 Reiki will heal. And I don't have any doubt about that myself, because I know in just any kind of energy healing we do, when the best interest of that person is at work and that person is seeking, that's the setup for, yes, this can happen. This can take place. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, and sometimes it's staying with it for a while, but it will happen. It will happen, and it can happen exponentially for the person who, as they want to develop.
Yeah, I actually was working on that today. I had a healing session, and of course, I've had trouble with my thyroid for a long time, probably longer than I was recognized by doctors and so forth. But
probably
we did a session on that, and it was, I would say, what we pulled out of it was that it was dormant, unhealed energy. They use the term like ancestors, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we're talking here in our own lives, in our own personalities, lives in between, lives now. I mean, I think about all of I'm doing kind of a memoir at this time in my writing, and it's based in location. That was the only thing I was going to write about, and then this thing happened. That's writing for me. But it's all of these sort of lives I've lived in this life, not separate from what I'm talking about in where I am, but my growth, my development, that I'm different. I'm just not the same person I was when I was in my 20s, nor in my 30s, 40s. A lot of things have happened, and I have changed. And in that process, I have become who I am today. And there's been a lot of healing. There's still a lot of healing to go. And I may not be able to complete it in this lifetime, but a lot of it has been taken care of. And then there are these pieces that come from who knows where. And it seemed to show up in all families. I'm from a family of 11 kids. So here's all of these people in the same family, raised by the same parents, but those parents grew and changed too. And so each one of us got a different set of parents, but we don't think about that. We just think they're parents.
Right.
And I raised 4, and they're so different. And who gave them permission to be that different? That makes it hard on a parent.
Yeah.
So we have all of that past life stuff, but some of it probably comes through the DNA, especially when we're looking at diseases there doesn't seem to be any reason for it in that family. Or when it's mental illness, and you'll think, well, Uncle Joe, and great grandpa and whoever had that too. And so what happened in the Old Testament, or in the Hebrew scriptures, I should say, there's talk of curses. Well, we know about curses. We know that those can be enacted in such a way that spiritually it can compromise a person. And if you go back in time, in the scriptures, they'll talk about to the seventh generation. And so there can be this thing that hangs on for a long time. There's something, I don't know, magical about that word, that number 7.
There is. There's a lot, actually. I mean, you can find symbolism on that like crazy.
Yeah. And I don't begin, I know this much. I mean, it isn't.
Well, I think that, I think the key thing here is that it's significant. That's all that matters. I don't even think the actual number matters, right? Because when I've done ancestral work, either for myself or for a client, I mean, you can ask numbers, but to me, it's almost like asking a name. Like, does it really matter what the name of the thing is? It doesn't really matter. It just matters that it's there and you want to deal with it.
Yeah. And that's what we're finding in addition to knowing these things that he writes about. We also know that there's these other extenuating things that happen. So you get one area of your life that seems to be like working okay. And then all of a sudden it flares again. How come? Well, maybe you brought that with you somewhere. Or maybe it got sent to you from someone. Don't know, but it needs to be dealt with. And I read something not too long ago where it said when you deal with your own ancestral issues, mine, when I do, then the whole line gets healed in that area.
Oh yeah. I've seen that. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 years when I've been doing this kind of work, I was working on that myself before my mother died. Like I had been working for not quite a year, I don't remember exactly, but trying to prepare myself for that because I didn't want to have the same situation happen to me that had happened to me when my husband died. And it was really, really interesting having that come up. We would work on something and, some new information would come to light. Maybe we would get some information on ancestors or, whatever the case may be. And she kept saying that. She kept saying, if you work on healing this, you're not just healing it for yourself, you're healing for all your ancestors and you're also healing it for the people below you, right? Like the ones coming. Yeah, so my daughter, and I think the thing that was most amazing was, we were talking about female things, but the thing that was most amazing is when we do that work, you kind of pull out what's the thinking behind it, or what are the ideas or energies behind this problem that you're dealing with. And when you start to see what those thoughts or those practices or whatever they are, when you really start to see them, then you start to recognize, oh yeah, I've been doing that. And I don't really have to do that. I mean, I can remember teaching my daughter, for me, the most poignant one was, it was like a need to defend, which actually comes from my father's side. But so I encouraged her to stand up for herself whenever. That I did not necessarily encourage, and had to do with females. I did not necessarily encourage my son in the same way because I felt like the experience of male and female is not even. It's very different.
Yes.
And given the fact that she's female, I wanted her to be able to stand up for herself. So I've always encouraged her to do that. And so through these conversations, I reckon, that's not necessarily the healthiest expression of a female energy, but it was something that I had encouraged, that I had taken on from my lineage, specifically the females. But I didn't, when we did the ancestor work, it was like, oh, this is also on your masculine side. They needed to defend themselves. So it was a misuse of that masculine energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It is cool. It is, it feels really good when you feel like you've healed it, which is not like a party. It's not like, boom, it's there, although it can be, I guess. It's not always like that. It's more of a subtle thing where the next time you run into that experience that triggered it, it's not there. And
have
it's
a
very
freedom
quiet.
finally. It's a freedom.
Yeah.
And that's nice.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for that on the thyroid because we did quite a bit of work today, and I actually, it was actually for me, it was a little disorienting, and she said that came from the ancestral work, but yeah, and I've never had it actually. I've never had energy like that. I've never felt disoriented, but she was like calling in the ancestors, and we were healing that part of it. It was quite involved.
I bet it was. It was. Do you write this? Do you record this? Do you have it somewhere?
Oh, you're talking about the healing that I just did?
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't record it. No, I wish we would, because I would listen to it over and over again.
Yeah.
Because today I was so disoriented that it's not that I couldn't form sentences, but I definitely was not. My mind was not where I could actually kind of put the pieces together. And of course, later in the session, she said something to that effect. But
well, it's interesting because we went to Tai Chi tonight, and that happened to my friend Sandy. I think it's something in the air, and
maybe
I think the negativity from these wars is really affecting us, and it's disorienting.
Oh yeah, and I think there's a lot brewing too. Even my husband, who's not into any of this, right, doesn't really know any. I think he knows some of it. He doesn't know he knows it, but he's not really into this. But I can see it brewing within him.
Yeah,
and it's coming out of his mouth, so he's anticipating some pretty big changes, which has him a little bit nervous. Sure. I mean, changes oftentimes are like that, but
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I found it interesting because when I was looking at all of these, all of the other heavens after that, or it's kind of a hierarchy, the way it's written. I don't think that's the way it is, but that's the way we can understand it in a, just a flat way. But these things, we have this authentic, the thing that hit me when I was getting the teaching ready was this authentic self that connects me with the divine, moves down through my spirit, and then my spirit influences my soul, which houses the will, the intellect, and the emotions. And then the emotions then are expressed through the ego, or not the emotions, but the soul is expressed through that ego. So depending on what we put inside that soul will determine how we present ourselves to the world, how we will manifest who we say we are. I found the process of thinking that kind of cool, because I thought then the reverse is true. What I take in through the ego influences the soul, and then it can go back through the spirit, and then more information can come through.
That's really interesting, because if you take it from an astrological perspective, kind of what you're describing is you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So, but the influences that we kind of pulled into our lives this time when we were born, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, affects how we have emotion, what did you say for the soul?
The intellect, the will, and the emotion. So it's knowledge and powers of choice and decision making.
Okay, so all of that can be seen in an astrology chart. You see, of course, it does come out in personality, and you can see that too, which I think we oftentimes associate personality with ego, but you definitely see that in astrology, where the person will have certain circumstances happen, which is the stuff that we're kind of calling in energetically. As a matter of fact, that's what she was telling me with my thyroid was the reason I have to heal this is that, I want to heal my issues with money too, right? Like I want to have a better business. I want to have more impact. And it's not like an ego thing. Like I know that I'm meant to do this. I've seen it in my chart. This is something I have to do. And I knew that. But she actually said, you're not going to be able to do that until you heal this part of you. And she's not the only one who said it. I got a hand reading and a psychic reading, and it's I don't know. I've seen it in my astrology chart. It's like everywhere I turn, I see it, right? So it's there. I know it's there. But I have to heal that part. And it's not just my life. That's what she said today. It's like, it's not your life. It's not something you did, because I'm looking at the metaphysical anatomy book, and I'm like, ooh, those sentences talking about thyroid are really like, ooh, that's touchy. Like, I tried to look at it back in March before I had like a wedding and a funeral and all. And I was like, oh, I don't think I can do that right now. I just wanted to deal with life. But I'm looking at it again, and it's like, oh God, that really still is. And I'm thinking, oh, that was, I see the people who were in my life that played those roles, right? But I was born at a specific time. We choose to come in, right? Mm-hmm. I was born at a specific time. The information about those trials are in your astrology chart. Mm-hmm. So it's the same concept where you're pulling in those energies, and then it gets expressed through whatever you have as a personality or an ego or what have you. Mm-hmm. And you're right, it goes both ways. And that's the same thing that Dr. Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and who's the other guy? Joe Dispenza. They talk about that. So they talk about Lipton used to be is a cellular biologist.
Yes.
And he took a stem cell and put it in different petri dishes with different substrate around it, right? And of course, they all developed into different cells, like muscle cells, heart, I don't know, whatever all the cells are, right? Different parts of the body. And of course, he was thinking this is when he didn't have any money for his studies or his research. And he really recognized that it's the environment, right? Yeah. So then he started to make that connection. Thoughts are our energetic environment.
They are the energy that will influence the whole schmear.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why if you get control of those thoughts, you have better control of your life. And that's why meditation or prayer, not necessarily the talking to, right? But the prayerful.
Oh, we're not talking that kind.
Yeah.
About energy.
Yeah. When you're not talking.
Right.
When you're in that space, then you allow for the flow. And I've heard this all over the place. I know Deepak Chopra talks about it. Yeah. All kinds of people. If you can stop the energy of the thoughts and just go into quiet, then you get back connected with that first part, that authentic self comes back in.
Yes, it can. Because it has room then.
Right.
It's making in the contemplative world, it's making space. And at first that feels like you're lazy or like you're not doing something, or it's like but something's got to be there. But making the space then allows for, they would say, the spirit, the authentic self, to be revealed, to be there, be present, because our authentic self is in the present. Mm-hmm. It's not past, it's not future. It's the connection we have to our spirit guides, to our God as we understand him or her or it or whatever.
I think that's when people talk about awakening is when you're in that space and you finally start to recognize. I think it goes a little bit farther than just recognizing what it is, but actually like getting significant information from it.
Yes. Yeah. Not just getting information. It's being open to receiving the pieces that we've asked help for, or that are, I over and over, I tell people I can see the holes in my head. I mean, it's like, it's like an aeration kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I can see them, but I can't always pull the things out of them that need to come out. And I don't always know what needs to go in. And that's where the other side has to help me. They have to, because I'm at their mercy if otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm open to whatever. And I don't want whatever. I want
Mm-hmm.
mine intentional.
Yeah.
There was another thing that I saw that he had written about that I thought was pretty cool. Well, it's way back on the very first page I had. Oh, yeah. Was talking about holy fire Reiki. It definitely is different. But when I first was introduced to Reiki and began doing going for different trainings, my own trainings, it wasn't, the attunements were the method for receiving the symbols that we use for working with Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
Holy fire doesn't use attunements. It uses visualizations or meditations. They call them placements in Reiki 1 and 2 and ignitions for master level. So you have Holy Fire Reiki. He says that it is a noticeably more refined, comes from a higher level of consciousness. I thought that was interesting because to me, energy is energy.
Mm-hmm.
I know the energy, different forms of energy operate at different vibrations and frequencies. That's about as much as I know. I know those words and I can see them in my head. But to say that this comes from a higher level of consciousness, I assume it comes from the highest.
I find that really interesting. I had heard about Reiki before they shifted to Holy Fire 3, but I had never really been involved with it. But when I first started learning this, it was not right after they had started Holy Fire. They had done Holy Fire 2, but I learned Holy Fire 3. That was the first one that I learned. So that's where we were in the history. But through the years, as I practiced it, I actually got hired by another Reiki practitioner who's very, very good and very articulate. I mean, she's actually quite good at what she does. And for some reason, I guess I was working on her, and I was very young in this, so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to do what I was taught. We'll see.
That's right.
And yeah, she asked me, were you trained in Holy Fire? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, yeah, I can always tell a difference. So it's interesting that even she's pretty sensitive to the energies, but it's interesting that somebody can actually tell a difference. Now, I'm going to say, if it was me, I would say, I would try and describe the physical difference, but that's not really all of the energy, right?
No.
But what I find really interesting about it, and this is, I kind of have, since I learned anything about Reiki, I kind of thought this. And then as I took the course, it was like, yeah, I definitely think this. I think that there are people, and this would be backed up by astrology too. There are people who, whether it's part of their personality or their circumstances, again, this is what they set when they come in as souls, right? That have an inkling towards spirituality. Mm-hmm. Or they have an inkling, or they have circumstances, or something's happening to make it easier for them to get to that. Mm-hmm. I think that there are people who do Reiki with their intentions being good, and the focus, the way that you have to do for Reiki, that they actually do Reiki without them being trained in it. I've experienced that. I've had a massage therapist in Louisiana who I didn't know what it was because I hadn't taken the Reiki course yet. But now that I've gone through the process, I now know that woman was doing Reiki. She didn't know she was doing it, but she was doing it. And so, and it reminds me of, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've always been a spiritual person, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I kind of wonder if people who are inclined to be spiritual can naturally pull this gift in because it is from the divine. It is directly from source, very similar to holy fire. Basically, it's the same thing, right? I think people can actually pull that in. They don't necessarily have a name for it. They don't necessarily know what they're doing with it, but usually those people, you're not battling the intentions being bad, right?
Right.
People who are focused like that, their intention is good, which is in alignment with Reiki, which causes it to come in more.
It's always healing.
Yeah.
It's always for the highest good of the other. Always. Mm-hmm. I can't ever think of a time it hasn't been. I guess I'm not even sure that it's always Reiki that we operate from, but there is a higher power, a higher strength, a higher energy. And I think that can manifest in many ways. Reiki is one word. And Reiki, there are different, I've done some of the research on the different kinds of Reiki. There seems to be 5 major groups of Reiki. And then out of there can be, I think, as many as about 30 other schools of Reiki thought. And I think that we can call them all Reiki, but I think that there are different levels of frequency and energy. And depending on the practitioner, on what the practitioner on that given day who is doing the healing work for that person, if they're a little off, the energy may not have its strength that it would ordinarily have. Reiki is going to go where it's going to go. The Holy Spirit is going to go where it's going to go. Healing prayer is going to go where it's going to go. It knows. But I also know that it's coming through us. And so some of that gets hampered because it's coming through the human person. What I find amazing about this energy, and it's so profound, is that it trusts us. You know, we don't trust very well. We don't trust other people. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust, but that energy, once we've been open to receiving it, it trusts us to use it for good.
Mm-hmm.
It trusts us. How come? I find that just mind-blowing.
I think it goes back to
otherly.
What?
That is certainly otherly.
Yeah.
Beyond.
But I think it still goes back to being, the oneness, okay? In the sense that if we're all part of each other, right? Like, it's not like there's this other person that's not connected to me. This other person is also part of me. It's just a different part that I don't physically experience. If that's the case, it's like when we do this work, you don't really need to convince anybody because it's never an issue. But when you're working with other people and the intention is not there for your best good, it's not the same as working with yourself, because there is absolutely no room for you to say, I think I want to do this bad thing to myself. Right? Like, it doesn't work like that. Nobody does that. Nobody says, I think I'm going to do this thing that's caused me all this trouble. And, no, your intentions for yourself are the most pure and honest and truthful. And it's the closest connection that I think we can find. If you ask your heart, what you're doing is you're asking that part of you that you're talking about that comes through, right? The authentic self. You ask the authentic self, you're always going to get a loving answer, right?
Absolutely.
So it has to be any other that way. Yeah. So it has to trust us because we know that we're doing the best we can, right?
Yes, I know, but I still find it mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That we are trusted as much as we are, not only for ourselves, but for others.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard a story I thought was so crazy, but someone was angry with a neighbor, and the neighbor, she had a friend who had learned Reiki, had gone to Reiki training. I think I learned this in one of my first Reiki classes, Reiki trainings. And the lady that was angry with her neighbor wanted this Reiki person to send bad juju to this person. I mean, totally not understanding what Reiki is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that low vibration thinking and that intention that is not for others' highest good, and thinking that it can be manipulated into causing harm for another, which is sad.
It is, but it is interesting because I can remember being in college. I wasn't particularly religious, but it's not that I wasn't exposed to religion. It just wasn't presented to me as the only option. Okay. So I go off to college and you encounter all different kinds of people. And I can remember being in the room with my roommate and she said, Blair, do you pray? So my ego got a little offended because I was like, I cannot believe you're asking me if I pray. So I just answered it, kind of probably a little bit smarmy, but it was late at night, lights were out and everything. And she said, will you pray for, and I don't remember what it was, but it was some stuff that she wanted, right?
Yeah.
It was like, she was trying to convince me about what she was getting or what she was asking for was the best for her, right?
Yeah.
And at that age, so I was 17, at that age, me and my ego were kind of appalled because I was like, so you're going to tell God what it is that you need? That's the best thing?
Oh, yeah.
You think he
People
doesn't
do
know?
it all the time.
Oh, I know they do. I know. But that's a difference between that talking prayer that we were mentioning and the being open, right?
Yes. Yes. Very, very, very funny. But people do it all the time.
They do.
They do it all.
And we teach, I think as a society, we teach people to do that. Mm-hmm. We'll pray for this. That's like common language. We'll pray for this thing. We'll pray for them. Like the highest good. I don't think there's words.
I know.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. I one of the ways I teach prayer is about my heart right here in my chest, and in my mind, there are little tiny slits in my heart all over, and they're little mailboxes and or places to put. And what I put there then is that person's name that I'm praying for. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so every so often throughout the day, I just tap my heart, knowing that I'm praying for that person. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to tell God what to do. I don't have to tell that person what to do. I just give it a slap, and I'm reminded. My body is reminded. We're praying. Mm-hmm. We're not just saying those words. I'll pray for you. I am praying, but I'm not. I'm not directing the prayer.
Yeah.
Because I'm not in charge. It's taken me years to learn that, Blair. Years. Nothing like an ego that big.
Well, I don't think it's all that uncommon. I think it's really common to be like that.
It is.
I think we do teach each other that. I mean, that happens normal in this first heaven. I mean, or first dimension is definitely something that you learn.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.